If you're waiting for Atlanta home prices to crash before you buy, you might be waiting for the wrong thing. While everyone watches for a price drop, something more dangerous is already happening beneath the surface. Atlanta isn't becoming one market that goes up or down together. It's splitting into two. Some areas are still climbing. Others are quietly losing value on the same day under the same Atlanta headline. Economists call this a K-shaped market, and it's harder to escape than a crash. A crash resets and lets buyers back in. This just traps people on the wrong side of the split. I'm Tim Trevathan, and I've helped hundreds of families navigate Atlanta's market over the past several years. Here's what this video will cover: why stable or flat prices might actually be hiding a bigger problem, and secondly, the affordability trap most buyers never see coming, and third, what separates the corridors that are climbing from the ones that are bleeding value. I have been watching this split develop across Gwinnett County, North Fulton and South Forsyth, and really all of North Metro Atlanta for the past several years. And the gap between the winners and the losers is accelerating. The sign that worries me most is not one of the obvious ones. Most buyers walk right past it. I'll show you what it is before this video is done. But first, let me walk you through every warning flag I am seeing in the Atlanta market right now. Starting with number 10. Sign number 10, stagnant appreciation, masking deeper problems. So everyone keeps saying the Atlanta market is stable, but here is what the numbers actually show when you look more carefully. Atlanta home prices were down 4.7% year over year as of March 2026. The median sits at $434,000, and homes are now sitting on the market for 70 days on average, up from 57 days just a year ago. That is a 23% jump in days on market in 12 months. So when you hear stable market, what that often means is that sellers haven't lowered their asking price yet, but buyers have slowed down. They're hesitating, they're waiting. And when buyers hesitate in a market where costs keep rising, equity builds painfully slow for the homeowners already in those properties. Outside the high-end new construction segment, analysts are forecasting flat to modest annual appreciation of 1% to 3% across the metro, with certain overbuilt districts expected to see real price softening. Here's what this costs you if you miss it. Say you buy a $450,000 home expecting the equity gains that buyers got in 2021 or 2022. At 1% annual appreciation, you are building roughly $4,500 in equity per year from price growth, before maintenance costs, taxes, and insurance. At 4.7% negative appreciation, you have lost roughly $21,000 in paper value in year one alone. That is not the investment story most buyers are telling themselves when they sign the contract. The downstream consequence is reduced mobility. Homeowners who bought expecting appreciation and got stagnation instead find themselves unable to sell without losing money. They are stuck, and that trap gets tighter every year. Affordability does not improve. The move here is to focus on neighborhoods with genuine economic fundamentals under them, not just neighborhoods that used to be popular. I'll show you exactly how to identify those as we go through this list. Sign number 9, widening gap between winning and losing neighborhoods. Not all of Atlanta is moving in the same direction, and the gap between winning and losing neighborhoods is accelerating faster than most buyers realize. A 207 neighborhood analysis of Atlanta released in April 2026 confirmed exactly what I have been telling clients for the past 18 months. The top performing Atlanta neighborhoods are up 5% to 6% annually. The least expensive areas have lost as much as 7% of their value over the same period. That is a 12 to 13 percentage point spread in a single year in the same city. In North Metro Atlanta, for example, Johns Creek's median sales price sits at $700,000, up modestly at 0.2% year over year as of February 2026. Alpharetta's median is $724,000 as of March 2026, though it has softened by 5.4% year over year. South Forsyth is hovering around $600,000, with some areas softening 2 to 3%. Meanwhile, areas like Old Fourth Ward are down more than 2% in recent years, and wide stretches of Southwest Atlanta are registering the steepest declines in the metro. This is the K-shaped recovery I mentioned in the intro. Two completely different markets coexisting under the same Atlanta headline. Here is the dollar cost of landing on the wrong side of that split. A A buyer who purchases a $400,000 home in a declining corridor and loses 7% of value has lost $28,000 in equity in year one. A buyer who chose a home in a strengthening North Metro corridor at the same price point and gained 5% is sitting on a $20,000 gain. That is a $48,000 spread on the same purchase price, depending purely on zip code selection. The downstream consequence of getting this wrong is being trapped. If you buy in a declining area and values fall further, you may owe more than the home is worth or be unable to sell for years without taking a loss. That is exactly what a K-shaped market does. It creates long-term geographic winners and losers, and those divides are hard to reverse. The solution here is research before you commit, understanding which corridors have infrastructure investment, job growth, and school quality working in their favor, and what separates the winning purchases from the ones that quietly bleed equity. Sign number 8, mortgage rate lock-in, creating artificial inventory shortage. Homeowners in Atlanta are sitting on mortgages they refuse to give up, and that decision is quietly strangling the supply side of the market. Here's the reality. More than 51.5% of outstanding mortgages nationally carry rates at or below 4%. Today's 30-year fixed rate in Georgia is at 6.875%. The typical homeowner who sells and buys at today's prices would see their monthly mortgage payment rise by nearly $1,000 on a comparable home. So what does a rational homeowner do? They stay put. They do not sell. This is called the mortgage rate lock-in effect, and it is particularly pronounced in Atlanta. Established communities from Buckhead and Decatur all the way up through the rapidly growing North Metro suburbs are seeing fewer listings because homeowners will not give up their 3% rate to take on a 6.875% rate for essentially the same house. Atlanta's available inventory has grown modestly, but the underlying pressure tells the real story. There is a critical lack of entry-level inventory because homeowners who would normally move up or downsize are frozen in place. The cost to you as a buyer is fewer choices and increased competition for the homes that do come available. And in practical terms, that means more bidding situations, fewer concessions from sellers, and less negotiation leverage on price. The downstream consequence is market inefficiency. When natural turnover stops, pricing distortions develop. The homes that do sell set prices without the full range of comparable transactions the market normally produces. That creates risk on both sides. The strategy to navigate this is to look seriously at new construction in communities where developers are still actively building and get your financing structure right from the start. There are strategies including rate buy-down programs and adjustable rate options that can reduce the monthly payment gap between what is available and what you are used to seeing. Now, you have just seen 3 of these warning signs, and the clearest message they send is that location selection inside Atlanta matters more than it ever has. The gap between the winning and the losing parts of this market is real. It is documented and it is growing. This is exactly why I put together my Atlanta relocation guide. Inside, I walk you through the entire North Metro Atlanta suburbs in detail: Gwinnett County, North Fulton, South Forsyth, and the school districts, the commute realities, the neighborhoods that have genuine long-term fundamentals versus the ones that look good on paper but carry the risks we've been talking about. Most buyers researching Atlanta from out of state are trying to compare suburbs that look similar from a distance but are completely different once you understand what is actually driving values in each one. My guide helps you cut through all of that. You can download it for free using the link in the description below. And then let's keep going, because the next warning signs get more specific and more important. Sign number 7, first-time buyers being systematically priced out. First-time buyers are being pushed out of the Atlanta market, and the data shows this trend has been accelerating for years with no near-term reversal in sight. According to the National Association of Realtors, first-time buyers now account for just 21% of all home purchases in the United States. That is a historic low, and the median age of a first-time buyer has climbed to a record high of 40 years. NER's chief researcher noted that the share of first-time buyers has contracted by 50% since 2007, right before the Great Recession. The natural demand base at the entry level of the housing market is collapsing. In Atlanta specifically, aspiring owners must save roughly 10% of the median household income every single month just to accumulate a 10% down payment. And when they do manage to get into into the market, they are competing against move-up buyers with significant equity from prior homes and investors with cash positions. So now, Atlanta does rank 4th nationally for first-time buyer opportunities, according to a 2026 Zillow analysis, which found 45% of homes on the market are considered affordable for first-time buyers. That is genuinely good news for the broad metro picture. But in North Metro Atlanta, places like Johns Creek, Alpharetta, and Swanee, where I work with most of my buyers, the inventory under $450,000 that qualifies as a first-time purchase is extremely thin and heavily contested. The cost of this displacement is not just personal, it is structural. When first-time buyers disappear from a market, the entire move-up chain slows down. Existing owners cannot sell their starter homes if there is no one to buy them. That reduces the liquidity of the whole market. The downstream consequence is the demographic imbalance increasingly drives rental demand upward, which in turn attracts more investor purchases at the entry level, which in turn reduces the affordable inventory even further. It is a compounding cycle. The strategic response is to look at emerging neighborhoods within commuting distance of the major North Metro job corridors where prices have not yet caught up with demand. These pockets still exist. You just need to know where to find them. Sign number 6, infrastructure investments creating new winners and losers. A $4.6 billion infrastructure investment is already under construction along the Georgia 400 corridor, and it will permanently separate the property value trajectory of North Fulton and South Forsyth from the rest of the metro. Heavy construction officially began in April 2026 on a 16-mile Georgia 400 express lane project running from the North Springs MARTA station in Fulton County all the way up to just north of McFarland Parkway in Forsyth County. The project is expected to complete in 2031. Travel during peak hours is projected to be up to 30% faster on the express lanes compared to the general purpose lanes running alongside them. Think about what this means for property values. If you buy near Georgia 400 corridor before this project is complete, you are buying ahead of a permanent commute improvement that the Georgia Department of Transportation estimates will serve a corridor housing over 20% of the metro's entire population by 2050. If you buy in an area bypassed by this investment, you are watching nearby neighborhoods accelerate away from you in both desirability and value. So here's the other side of this equation. Gwinnett County remains entirely outside the MARTA system. MARTA operates almost exclusively in Fulton, Clayton, and DeKalb counties. Gwinnett residents rely on Ride Gwinnett buses that connect to MARTA at the Dorville station. There is no equivalent multi-billion-dollar transit investment in Gwinnett County scheduled at this scale. The cost of missing this is a widening gap. Buyers who choose the Georgia 400 corridor in North Fulton or South Forsyth are buying into a government-backed infrastructure story that will play out over the next 5 years. Buyers who overlook it are not necessarily making a bad purchase, but they are not getting the infrastructure tailwind working in their favor. The downstream consequence is a permanent geographic advantage shift. Once infrastructure is in place, property values adjust. The time to benefit is before completion, not after. After completion, the price appreciation has already happened. Research the 5 to 10 year municipal development plans for any area you're seriously considering. In Atlanta right now, the Georgia 400 corridor is one of the clearest infrastructure stories the market has produced in years. Sign number 5, construction cost pricing out middle market new supply. Builders in Atlanta cannot make the numbers work at the price points most families need, and that gap is widening every year. New home construction in Georgia now ranges from $150 to $350 or more per square foot depending on location and finishes. The total cost to build a home excluding land now ranges from $300,000 to $700,000 on average. In North Georgia, which includes Cherokee, Pickens, and the communities feeding into North Metro Atlanta, custom home construction starts at $225 to $350 per square foot for living space, with luxury finishes pushing above $400 per square foot. None of that includes the land. What this means in practice is that builders cannot produce a new home in North Metro Atlanta for under approximately $400,000 and turn a profit. So they do not try. All new supply is being targeted at the luxury and upper middle segment. The builder response to middle market demand is not new supply, it is absence. Georgia has grown by by more than 250,000 new households in recent years, but has built fewer housing units than that growth requires. The Metro Atlanta multifamily construction pipeline has fallen to a decade low, with approximately 9,800 units forecast to come online in 2026, well below prior year peaks. Rising interest rates, supply chain pressure, labor shortages, and elevated material costs are all compounding on top of each other. The dollar cost to middle market buyers is forced participation in bidding wars over aging inventory. Instead of buying a new $350,000 home, buyers at that price point are competing for 20 or 30-year-old homes with deferred maintenance, older systems, and less energy efficiency. So that gap between what you needed and what you got adds a real cost over the first 5 years of ownership. The downstream consequence is that the affordable housing stock in North Metro Atlanta is gradually aging with no new supply replacing it from below. The strategic move here is to target slightly older homes in neighborhoods with strong school districts and infrastructure investment. A home built in the 1990s in Johns Creek with a good school district and proximity to Georgia 400 corridor is still a fundamentally sound purchase. What you want to avoid is aging inventory in areas without those underlying demand drivers. Sign number 4 is corporate relocation patterns shifting demand centers. Not all Atlanta zip codes share in the job growth story, and buying in the wrong one means betting against where the economic center of gravity is actually moving. In April 2026, Klockner Metals relocated its North American headquarters to Alpharetta. In 2026, Boehringer Ingelheim Animal Health is bringing approximately 500 employees to Johns Creek's Medley development. Meanwhile, Yamaha Motor is relocating its entire U.S. headquarters from California to Kennesaw, and AIG opened a 178,666 square foot innovation hub at Perimeter Summit in Q1 of 2026. Metro Atlanta is forecast to add 19,000 new jobs in 2026, the 4th highest gain among major U.S. metros. But those jobs are not evenly spread across the metro. Employment gains are concentrated in the Alpharetta and Johns Creek corridor, the Midtown Tech District, and along the perimeter in Dunwoody and Sandy Springs, with logistics and distribution hubs clustering in South Fulton and College Park near Hartsfield-Jackson. If you buy in areas without major employer anchors, you are buying into a neighborhood that depends on outward commuters rather than local job proximity. That is a different demand profile. Here's the cost of getting this wrong. Properties near major job clusters command consistent demand because employees want to minimize commute time. When a major employer announces a relocation, the neighborhoods within commuting distance typically see accelerated price appreciation. Buyers who owned near Alpharetta before the recent wave of corporate announcements have benefited from that demand. Buyers who did not are watching it happen in a different zip code. The downstream consequence of ignoring employer patterns is that your buyer pool when you eventually sell will be narrower. Buyers with job options prioritize proximity to their workplace. If your neighborhood does not sit near a job cluster, you are selling to a subset of the market, not the full buyer pool. The move here is to track major employer announcements actively. Look at the economic development pages for Gwinnett County, Forsyth County, and the city of Alpharetta. That information is publicly available and it directly tells you where demand is being built for the next decade. Sign number 3 is property tax assessment lags, creating future shock. Most buyers budget for today's taxes, but Gwinnett and North Fulton assessments are catching up to peak purchase prices, and the bill is coming due. Let me give you a specific number. For a typical $425,000 home in unincorporated Gwinnett County, the 2026 annual tax bill is approximately $5,856 at the current combined 34.86 mill rate. That is nearly $490 per month added to your mortgage payment just for property taxes. And here's the problem. That number is not static. Gwinnett County's total property tax revenue collected increased 21% from 2022 to 2024. Home values in Gwinnett have climbed for 3 consecutive years. The Board of Assessors mailed approximately 311,000 annual notices of assessment for 2026. If you purchase at an elevated price point in 2023 or 2024 and your assessed value was still catching up to what you paid, that gap is now closing. In Forsyth County, Georgia's new floating homestead exemption, which took effect in January 2026 under House Bill 717, caps annual assessment increases at 4% for homestead properties. That protects existing homeowners, but it does not protect you as a new buyer who purchases at current market value. You step outside that cap the moment you close. In Fulton County, the millage rate held flat at 8.87 mils for 2026, the same rate since 2022. But with rising assessed values, the county is still collecting more from residents every year. The rate staying flat does not mean your bill stays flat. The dollar impact is straightforward. If your taxes increase by $150 per month from year 1 to year 3, that is $1,800 per year you did not budget for. For buyers who qualified at the edge of their debt to income ratio, that kind of unplanned increase creates real financial stress, in some cases forces a sale. The way to protect yourself is to factor projected assessments into your purchase decision before you make an offer. I walk every one of my buyers through this calculation. It takes 10 minutes and it can save you thousands. Now, I appreciate this video is all about market challenges, but if you're considering relocation to Atlanta in the next few months and you want advice from somebody that has been living and working in Atlanta for many years, then drop me a text or give me a call on 770-906-0748, and based on your budget and your preferences, we can work out the best neighborhoods for your budget. And now on to the next sign. Sign number 2, insurance and climate costs hitting specific housing types. The number that will blindside Atlanta buyers in 2026 is not on the listing sheet. It is the insurance renewal notice that arrives 3 months after closing. Georgia homeowners insurance rates rose 30.9% from 2019 to 2024. In 2024 alone, rates jumped 8.1% in a single year, driven by hurricane exposure, construction inflation, and labor and materials cost increases. In 2025, the average deductible rose 22%. And here is the one that really catches buyers off guard. Household insurance costs now represent roughly 9% of a typical homeowner's monthly mortgage payment. That is the highest share ever recorded. For properties in North Metro Atlanta, there are 2 compounding forces. First, Forsyth County, Johns Creek, and Alpharetta are all projected to see a 157% increase in the number of days above 102 degrees Fahrenheit over the next 30 years. Right now, these areas see approximately 7 extremely hot days per year. In 30 years, that number climbs to 18 days above 102 degrees. Older, less energy efficient homes will face dramatically higher cooling costs and HVAC replacement cycles on an accelerated timeline. Insurers price this risk. Second, over 18,000 Atlanta area properties face severe flooding risks within the next 30 years due to climate change. Atlanta has seen a 200% increase in flood risk over the past decade. The average flood damage claim exceeds $52,000. Standard homeowners policies do not cover flood damage. That is a separate policy. That is a separate premium. Many buyers do not find out until after closing. The cost to you is not a one-time hit. Insurance premiums compound. A $200 per month premium today could be $350 per month within 5 years on a property in a high-risk zone. Over a 10-year hold, that difference represents over $18,000 in unplanned costs before you account for any claims. The downstream consequence is a shrinking buyer pool for affected properties. When insurance becomes unaffordable, the number of buyers who can qualify for the home drops. Lenders require coverage. If coverage is too expensive, the effective buyer pool gets smaller and your resale options narrow. Before you make an offer on any property in North Metro Atlanta, get an insurance quote first, not after inspection, before the offer. I always walk my clients through this step because a $400,000 home with a $5,000 annual insurance premium is a fundamentally different financial decision than the same home with a $2,200 premium. And here we are, sign number 1, demographic cliff approaching as millennials age out. The biggest long-term threat to Atlanta home values is not a crash. It is a buyer pool that is structurally shrinking for an entire category of homes. Here's a statistic that stopped me in my tracks when I first read it. The share of Americans who are both married and own a home at age 30 has collapsed from 52% in 1960 to just 12% in 2025. 12%. That is not a cyclical dip. That is a generational restructuring of who the housing market's buyers actually are. At the heart of this is a generational handoff that is going badly. Millennials are the largest home buying generation in American history. They drove the demand surge of 2020 through 2023 quickly as they aged into buying years, peak buying years. But they are now aging out of the starter and move up home segment. The buyers who should replace them are Gen Z, and Gen Z is entering the housing market with less income and more debt than millennials had at the same age. The median home now costs 5 to 7 times the median household income nationally, compared to roughly 2.2 times in 1960. Home ownership at age 30 for Gen Z is just 22%, already trailing where millennials were at the same age. NAR confirms first-time buyers are just 21% of all purchases now at a record median age of 40. The share has contracted by 50% since 2007, and it keeps declining. For Atlanta specifically, there is a counterweight worth acknowledging. The Atlanta Regional Commission anticipates 1.8 million new residents arriving in Atlanta by 2050. Metro Atlanta's population grew to 6.4 million in 2024. New York City home buyers searched to move to Metro Atlanta, including Johns Creek and Alpharetta, more than any other destination city on Redfin's data in recent periods. International migration has been a significant driver of Georgia's population growth. These inbound flows provide genuine demand support that many other metros lack. But here's the risk most buyers miss. This demand is concentrated. It supports certain price points in certain neighborhoods. A $600,000 home in Johns Creek with a top-rated school district has a buyer pool that includes Asian American relocation families, high-income out-of-state movers, and corporate transferees. A 1,200 square foot home in an outer suburb at $280,000 has a buyer pool that is almost entirely dependent on first-time buyers, and that buyer pool is shrinking structurally. If you're buying in the $450,000 to $850,000 range in North Metro Atlanta with strong school district access, you are buying into a price point that has durable demand from multiple buyer profiles. That is the purchase that holds its resale potential over a decade. If you're buying below $300,000 in an area without those demand fundamentals, you are betting on a buyer pool that the data says is contracting. That is a sign most buyers completely miss. Not the monthly payment, not the rate, not even the taxes. It is whether the home you're buying today will have a qualified buyer pool 10 years from now. Unlike a crash that resets quickly, this affordability collapse traps people for years. If you buy the wrong property in the wrong corridor right now, you may not have a clean exit for a decade. But if you understand which parts of North Metro Atlanta have job growth, infrastructure investment, and genuine school quality working in their favor, you are buying with the market instead of against it. So hit subscribe for breakdowns like this one, and drop a comment below telling me which of these signs you are already seeing in the neighborhoods you have been looking at, and I'll be sure to respond.